Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning webinar from the Northern Automotive Alliance on virtual leadership. My name is Paul Lim. I'm the Managing Director of Action Coach Business Coaching in Bolton. And welcome to you all. First of all, I'd like to introduce Paul Jones. Paul is the Chief Executive of the Northern Automotive Alliance. And Paul's written a few notes here for anybody who's not a member of the Northern Automotive Alliance at the moment, but is on this webinar. I know it's been advertised in a couple of different places, who want to know more about what they do. You can also visit the website. So let's get started. This is an overview of what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about the difference between leadership and management. It'd be really interesting to hear from you all about what you feel the differences are between leadership and management. We're going to talk about using technology as a tool in the remote leadership model. We'll discuss the 3 O's model and also what we mean by servant leadership mindset. And then we'll go on to talk about what's next. So first of all, I'd like you all to think about what the difference is between leadership and management. Put your answers in the Q&A box, the question and answer box, and let us know what you think is the difference between leadership and management. I'm just going to pause the recording here for a second to give people a chance to put some notes in. Yeah, we've had some really good responses there from you all. Let's go through what we feel the differences are between leadership and management. First of all, leadership. Leadership is there to create focused and passionate team members. You know, leadership brings a positive emotion out. There's some real keys to leadership that we'll go through more in just a second. And then when you look at management, management is there to create competent and productive team members. And the key to management is that it brings logic and results to the process. So leadership's about passion, and management is about creating competent, productive team members, about logic and results. Let's look at each of these in a little bit more detail. Let's look at leadership first of all. Communication in leadership is absolutely key. You know, we often talk about communication in a throwaway sense, in a glib fashion, but communication is absolutely key. And there's some real important aspects to communication from a leadership perspective that are important to understand. The first one is to be absolutely clear, to have absolute clarity in the messages that you're trying to get across to your team. As importantly is you understanding the audience that you're working with. We'll go into this in a little bit more detail, but later on in the webinar. But it's really important that you talk to people in the way that they want to be talked to. Communicate with them in the way that they want to be communicated with. You need to address the concerns of your team. It can be a challenging time, you know, there's no doubt about it. Even as leaders, we're challenged at the moment, but our teams are going to feel the pressure. Leadership, as we said before, has got to be emotion-based. You've got to bring positive emotion to this. You've got to be clear and concise in your communication. Be proactive, and as importantly, make sure you're communicating very, very frequently with your team. Now, you've also got to teach your team to think for themselves as well. Ultimately, if you want a great company, your team has got to run that company for you. Your team's got to run it, no doubt. And then you've got to be able to make quick decisions with speed. You've got to be able to adjust your thinking with speed as well. Leadership is about making quick decisions, not procrastinating, moving on quickly. And as a leader, you've got to make sure you're looking at the big picture and not at the detail. Have an attitude of big picture. How can we all make this work? How can we make this work? You know, have a can-do attitude. And really right now, abundance is key in a leadership position. You've got to show abundance to your team, to your community, to your suppliers, to your customers. Have a really positive mindset, be filled with abundance. You know, we've got to be creative. We've got to think and act differently right now because we're in different times. You know, we're going to have the new normal. We're not going back to normal when lockdown finishes. It's going to be a different normal. You've got to look at it in a really positive way. You've got to treat leadership with lots of positive emotion, and communication is key to that. Let's have a look at management. Management, we said you've got to bring logic and results to management. And there's some key areas. Alignment is one. Looking at the priorities of the business, looking at the priorities of your particular team, and making sure that everybody's aligned with those priorities and the tasks that they need to do, the goals and tasks they need to do. Focus is equally important. You've got to look at the most important things right now and focus what you can control. And one of the important things about that is time. You can control your time. How are you spending your time? Are you controlling time, or is time controlling you? Do you have a default diary? Do you have a great way of managing the time you're spending so you're absolutely clear and focused on what you're doing? You talk to the best business leaders in the world and they will always say that they're absolutely clear and focused on how they're spending the time. Follow through on your activities as well. Do what you say you're going to do as managers. Really important that your team look up to you as a manager, because you walk the talk. And organizational discipline, systems and structure are key. In order for your team to be successful, they've got to work within successful systems that you've set up. So no matter who is leading the team and who is leading the company on that particular day, everything happens as it should happen. And the team are thinking for themselves within the parameters of the systems and structure that you've set out. So when we talk about leadership in a virtual world, you've got to make sure that you're talking about leadership first and distance second. Don't let location or distance distract you from the fundamentals of leading people, because the leadership principles that have been around for years and years, the things that we've just talked about, don't change. Don't change. The only thing that's changing is distance. Now, there's 4 common questions that we get asked often, and remote leaders are asking themselves. And the first one, and I'm sure as managers and leaders, you've often asked this yourself as well: how do you know that people are really working when you're not actually watching them in front of them? There's some great tools out there to help you with understanding what people are doing. But it's really important that you come up with a clear communication strategy, clear goal setting strategy, so people can get on with the work, and then you'll know that they've completed that work if they've completed the goals that have been set. Number 2 is, are people getting enough social interaction? If you really care about your team, you'll care about whether they're working alone at home, whether they're getting social interaction either within or outside of the company. And then it's important that you get good feedback from them. How are you communicating with them? How are you asking for feedback from your team, so you know what's working and what isn't working, and you can consider your options? We're going to talk about a little bit later about a great free survey that you've got the opportunity to take part in from a company called Engagement Multiplier. You can take this survey and feed it out to your teams and get anonymous responses back to you that will really help you judge the temperature of your team and judge what's working and what isn't working and how they're feeling about remote working right now. And you'll have the opportunity to access that absolutely free of charge. And finally, can we be as effective as when we were co-located, when we were working together? And yes, the answer to that is absolutely yes, if you've got the right fundamentals in place. And communication and technology is at the forefront of that. Now, leading remotely requires you to lead differently. We've talked about the same principles apply when you're leading remotely. And if you think about it, a lot of managers nowadays have people who work remotely to them. In a recent survey, it said 80% of white-collar managers have at least one, and often more, direct reports who work in a different location. So it's not a brand new thing. But the task of leadership is still fundamentally the same. except the methods of communication that have enabled them to succeed in the past have now changed. And the other thing is that quite often leaders, because of their position, will feel isolated from an emotional viewpoint. But that notion of a leader's sense of isolation is no longer simply emotional. You're separated by actual distance now. So there's two major repercussions for leaders. The task of leadership is still fundamentally the same. The methods of communication that have enabled leaders to succeed in the past have now changed. And the second major repercussion is that the notion of a leader's sense of isolation is no longer simply emotional. You know, some leaders do feel isolated from their teams in some way because they're leading and the teams are you know, doing the work, if you will. But now it's actually physical as well as emotional. But the act of leadership hasn't changed that much. So you need to do the same things, but in a different way and with a different set of tools. So when you're working remotely, it does change the dynamics, your interpersonal dynamics with people. So being seen is actually critical. Being able to see and to be seen is absolutely critical, and to be heard. And it can suffer when you're working remotely if you're not using the right tools to do that. Now, I'm sure you've all got examples of good and bad experiences in terms of remote communication. For instance, have you ever sent an email or a text message that's been interpreted the wrong way? It's exactly the same words, but because they can't see your body language or they can't hear the tone of your voice, it's being taken in a completely different context. So we lose that face-to-face and non-verbal feedback when we're not speaking to people face-to-face. So you've got to make sure that your message is easily understood and is understood in the right way. Communication is critical, and we'll keep saying this, it's all about communication. So you've got to find other ways to receive critical cues from your audience, and now your audience is your team. So how can you do that? Well, you can use technology. You know, Zoom and all the other video technology that's out there. Is Microsoft Teams is a great tool. We use that throughout our organization. It's a fantastic tool. Zoom is another great way to keep in touch with your people, not just with your team, but with your suppliers and with your clients as well. We use it extensively for client and supplier communication. So there's lots of great tools that are out there. And leadership is about, you know, the technology that you can use should be used as a tool and not a barrier. You've got to get to know the technology that you're working with. And the remote leadership model, it's three basic gears. The leadership and management gear is the basic fundamentals of the behaviors you exhibit as a leader, the things that we talked about right at the start. The largest gear, it's the most fundamental part of leading remotely, and it's based on those simple leadership principles. The second gear is the tools and technology gear, and without the right tools and technology, then you're not going to have the outputs that you want. And it's the most important difference when you're leading remotely. So make sure that you've got the right technology and that you're trained really well on how to use that technology. The third one is the skill and impact gear, and it's often the one that can cause the biggest issues because of what's going on further up those cogs. So it's a smaller gear, but it represents the simplest concepts, and it can cause the biggest problems. Choosing the most appropriate tools to make the most impact is critical to your effectiveness. So how are you going to communicate with people, and what tools are you going to use to communicate with them? How often are you going to use those tools as well? Leading also requires use of the a focus on the 3O model, and the 3O model is quite a simple model. It's outcomes, When we talk about outcomes, it's leading with purpose of reaching a desired outcome. What are your goals? Thinking about others, lead with and through your people. So in terms of the outcomes, think about the barriers to achieving those desired outcomes. The isolation, the lack of environmental cues, less repetition of messaging when you're working remotely. With the people that you've got to lead through, you're more influential when you focus on other people. And team members are more engaged when you focus on them rather than focusing on your own outcomes. And finally, yourselves, your own values, your beliefs, and your assumptions, who you are and how you lead is important wherever your people work. And people will see your values reflected in the way that you communicate with other people. Notice as well that outcomes and others comes before ourselves. And that's what we mean by the servant leadership principle. It's about thinking about the outcomes and others before ourselves. Now, when you're leading as well, you've got to make sure that you're setting goals. Remember that working remotely can be like living on an island. There's less interaction with you and with your other team members. There's less of a sense of belonging and team, if you will. It's easier for team members to lose sight of the big picture and of their specific role. So there are certain things you can do to ensure that everybody's aware of the big picture, everybody's aware of organizational goals, about team goals and personal individual outcomes as well. So you can develop electronic dashboards, online project reports, there's loads of different electronic tools that you can use to do this. But one of the other tools that you can use is obviously having regular meetings with your team to check in and to discuss goals and outcomes for the day, for the week, for the company, for the quarter, whatever it happens to be. So make sure that you set clear targets and you have a frequent discussion with your team on the organizational outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Team outcomes, people must know what they do fits into the work and success of the team. So what they do as an individual, how does that fit into the success of the team? And what the team does, how does that fit into the organizational outcomes? And from a personal viewpoint, make sure that you develop both goals and expectations for the individual members of the team. Establish the rules of working together and how to get support when they need it. And describe to your team what good communication looks like. So what does good communication look like to you? And what do you expect of your team? And then, as we said earlier, make sure that you walk the talk and make sure that you're the one communicating as effectively as possible, and then they can all follow you with that great communication. But the other thing in terms of goals is to make sure that you're focusing on achieving the goals and not just setting them. Make sure that you'll all have heard this acronym before: SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So in terms of setting these goals, what are the quantity components of the work? So make them specific and measurable. How does the time factor into the success of the work? So, when do they need to be completed by and in what timescales? And how are you going to measure the quality of the work that are being done? Quality is sometimes more difficult, but make all metrics, all KPIs and dashboards shared and visible to the team. Make sure everybody can see how they're achieving against the goals that you're setting. And quite often, as we've put there, setting in smaller chunks can be more effective to identify and address any delays and risks as you're going along. We'll talk very quickly about coaching. It's an area where sometimes leaders who will shy away from coaching teams effectively if they're not sure about how best to coach people. But coaching your team is really important. We do a lot of work around leadership and coaching skills for business owners and for leaders in organizations. And as you can see there, two of the reasons coaching remotely is more complicated and stressful. Every interaction that you have has got to be conscious and intentional. you'll be Zoom calling somebody or ringing somebody or emailing somebody or messaging somebody for a very specific purpose. You're not managing or leading by walking around the factory. These are intentional communications. And for leaders and for most people, communicating through technology does create some mental and social obstacles that just don't exist when you're in person. So coaching, one of the other key skills in coaching is it's got to be a two-way conversation, and the person who is being coached should be doing most of the talking. As a coach, you need to be asking great questions to start the dialogue and to get the person who's being coached thinking. And most importantly, always follow up after your coaching to confirm the outcomes and the message that you're looking at. Please just stick into the question and answer box if you've got any questions as we're going along. So the next area we're going to look at is just in terms of communication. And we're going to talk very briefly about the platinum rule. So the platinum rule is quite simple, and it's it's about communicating with others in the way that they want to be communicated with. So lead others in a way that works best for them. We all have different behavioral profiles. For instance, some people want very limited amount of information. They just want the highlights. They want to make a quick decision. Give me the highlights. Let's make a quick decision. Move on. What's next on the agenda? Whereas other people want lots of detail before they make a decision. So some people want lots and lots of detail. They want to know the ins and outs of a particular project, and then they'll make a decision based on all of that detail. And there's different behavioral profiles. Now, using a tool like DISC, behavioral profiling, there's lots of different tools out there, but DISC is a great tool to help you as business owners understand yourselves and understand your team. Now, we're DISC practitioners. We do a lot of work with organizations on DISC behavioral profiling. It's a really inexpensive way of profiling your team and understanding how, in terms of being business leaders, how best to communicate with your team. And it's a real eye-opener for some business owners. If you want more information on that, then please drop us a line afterwards at bolton@actioncoach.com, and we'll send you some more information on that. Relatively inexpensive to input, but the feedback you can get and the opening up of communication between the teams can be immense for you. So remember the platinum rule. Talk to people communicate with people in the way that they want to be communicated with, not necessarily in the way that you want to communicate. And also ask people how they want to work with you using neutral questions. So neutral questions like, how can I help you to be successful, or how can I help you to be more successful? I want to support you and help you to stay on track. How best can I do that? How often would you like for us to have a one-to-one? Find out how they want to be communicated with and how they want to work with you. Ultimately, to be a successful leader, not only do you need to see what people are doing, but you need to understand how they're thinking. So not only do you need to be seen in terms of how people are getting their communications from you, but you need to be able to gather information. You need to understand what's going on within the organization. You need to be more aware of what people are thinking, of the impressions that you're making with people. So how visible are you to your team, and what are they actually seeing, and how are you getting that feedback? I mentioned earlier on that we've got a great employee engagement tool from a company called Engagement Multiplier that helps you to do that. It helps you to temperature check how your employees are feeling right now. As I said, it's an anonymous feedback. So it's easy for me to say it. An anonymous feedback tool that you can use to help you to get feedback from your team, so you can see and understand what's going on within the organisation. So make sure your discovery process is broad as well for gathering information from the team and not isolated just to a few of your top team members. Make sure it's covering the whole organisation. So if you ask more people, you get a more complete view of the landscape about what's going on with individuals right now at the moment. Building trust at a distance doesn't happen by accident either. So you know, there are some components that you need for high levels of trust to be there in your organisation. A common purpose is really important. Do you and your team have the same purpose? Have you shared the company vision with your team? Secondly, it's about competence. Do you believe that the people you are leading are competent? Do you believe you've got the right team there to complete and run the organisation as you want them to? And what training do you need to give them to get them to that standard? And motivation. How motivated are your team? Are your people willing to go the extra mile? We always say to our clients, when you're recruiting, you recruit on attitude first and then on skills and experience. If you get a few people with a toxic attitude, then it can bring down a whole organisation. So make sure that you're motivated in the right way, but make sure when you're recruiting new people that you're using a recruitment system that ensures you get people with a go the extra mile attitude, with an attitude of going above and beyond the call of duty all the time. And we work with our clients all the time. We've got some really great recruitment systems that we help our clients with to make sure that they get the right people. And those people are worth their weight in gold. I'm sure all of you have got a few people like that in your organisation. If all of your people are like that in your organisation, you're really lucky, or you've done a fantastic job of getting them into the organisation in the first place, or you've got an action coach working with you. But it's, there are other things you can do. Try showcasing one person in each meeting, letting them talk about their work or their project to big them up. Share praise in public and delegate in public as well. Make sure to reflect the perception of fairness as well. Yeah, somebody's just put in the Q&A box. Love that point. I've done that twice. Recruited on attitude. It really does work. It's so important. So important. It can make a huge difference to your organisation. And the more alignment you've got between these three components, then the more trust that you're going to have within your organisation. Next, identify the results that you need. Identify the results that you need and then select the communication tool you want to achieve those results. You know, you need to strike the right balance between richness and scope. And by that, by richness, we're talking about the kind of communications where you probably need to use video, either a recorded message or Zoom or another tool like that. I'll refer you back to that YouTube video by Arne Sorensen in terms of richness. And if you've got a larger scope, you've got a bigger message, you've got more detail that you need to get across to somebody, then maybe an email, a newsletter, or even a recorded message all provide a broader reach and enable the people that you're communicating with to get the information that they need. But just be mindful about what you're trying to get across, who you're trying to get that across to, and how richly it needs to be done. Do you need to do that in a face-to-face Zoom call or a team video call? Or can you do it in a recorded message or perhaps an email or another form of communication? The tools that you use are important. I'm not going to go into this too much because I understand you've already had a webinar from another provider about the different tools that you can use, but choose the right tool for the right job and make sure that you've got enough training that you can do a good job with that tool. So video and recorded messages, they add a visual component. You can use common file locations to allow permanent and accessible central sort of warehouse storage of files. Emails are best used for a broad reach and recorded information. Webcam and video chat are the ultimate remote communication tool to give that richness. You can still use text messaging if you've got a really urgent, timely communication you need to get out. And then telephone and conference calls are a less effective option for one-to-one or group communication because there's less non-verbal cues and feedback, but they still have a place for us in this particular time. But most importantly, just accept that you can't do it all as a leader. You've got to find that right balance between being responsible for your organization and taking care of yourself as well. You know, the most successful organizations are the ones that have the most successful teams who can run those organizations using the systems and strategies that you as a leader have helped to put in place. So make sure that you're looking at your organization's process and workflow to make sure that you've got the right systems and strategies in place, and then start to identify areas where the team can handle the activities that you were doing before that they can now handle. But also identify areas for improvement. Make sure that you're delegating effectively and successfully as well. So when you're delegating something, there are a few key rules. You need to show somebody how to do it, then get them to show you how it's done, and then get them to show somebody else how it's done. 3 simple rules, but make sure you've got the right systems in place to allow them to do that successfully. Balancing your priorities is really important as a great leader, especially when you're in a long distance leadership position. There's a fine balance between self-preservation and selfishness though. You've got to understand that looking after yourself is important, but looking after your team is equally important. And your own values, your own attitudes will determine what you decide and how you decide what's truly important. Everybody's got the same amount of time. We've all got 168 hours in every week. The question is, how are you going to use that time? Time management is really about choice management. It's about making the right choices. And one of the keys that we often see for fantastic leaders is how they use their time. When I speak to some of the most productive leaders, the one key is that they have absolute clarity and focus on how they spend every minute of their day, working or otherwise, and they know exactly when they're going to switch off from work, and they're able to do it effectively. And understanding your own values, looking inside you for your own values, what is it that makes you tick, also allows you to prioritize the activities that you're looking at as well. So if you need any help around time management, we've got some really great tools around time management and helping you make the right choices as well. Finally, remember rule number 1. Think about leadership first, and distance second. You know, we just need to do the same things, but in a different way. The same leadership principles apply, but you just need to do them differently. Right now, it's more important than ever as business owners that you're leading your organization, that you're giving them that positive emotion, creating focused and passionate team members. That's what they want to see from you as leaders. But at the same time, you know, we can't ignore management. Management needs, has to be there to bring logic and results to the process. So think if you're doing both of those jobs in a smaller organization, think about the balance between the two. And if you've got a senior management team or a senior leadership team, make sure that they're leading and managing as well. So let's get leading. Let's get leading. So just to finish up, first of all, if you've got any questions, it's now 11:42, 11:43. Please put any questions that you've got in the question and answer box, any comments that you've got on any of the points that we've covered. It'd be great to hear from you. What I'd like you to do, if you can, is take a couple of minutes just to think about the notes that you've taken and what you've heard today, and list 5 ideas down that you can take action on today. I often say to people, sort of webinars, training, coaching, workshops, all of this stuff doesn't work. The only thing that works is if you do something about what you've heard and learned and written down today. So don't take your notes, put them, close your book, put them in a drawer and then not refer to them again. Write down an action point that you can take away from this webinar and actually implement into your business, or implement yourself, something that you need to do. And it may be that it's something else you need to learn. It may be another workshop that you need to go on. Whatever it happens to be, make sure you've got an action point written down. So can I just have a hands up from you all when you've written an action point down that you are actually committed to taking action on after this webinar? So you all know where the hands up button is. That's brilliant. We've got loads of people sticking their hands up. Please put your hand up when you've got that action point. So a couple of other things to talk about. So first of all, are you ready to develop a 90-day leadership plan? If you haven't got one, you really should have one. If you want one, then speak to us afterwards. We can schedule in either an individual or a group 90-day planning workshop for you. A couple of things I want to talk to you about very quickly. The thing that I mentioned earlier on, which is the Working from Home Employee Engagement Survey. It's completely free for you to use as a business owner right now. We will be sending a feedback form out immediately after this workshop webinar to everybody, and there'll be a checkbox on there so you can let us know whether you want to take advantage, what you want to take advantage of from these sections here. So we're running a 2-hour complimentary leadership workshop, a group workshop that anybody can come on to. We're also running a 3-hour 90-day planning workshop, again completely free for anybody. And if anybody on the call wants some more focus and clarity for themselves and their businesses, but not in a group environment, then for everybody who's on the call, we're happy to gift a 30 to 60 minute one-to-one coaching session for you. So we'll just book in, we'll send you a little note that you need to complete beforehand, and then we'll spend an hour, maybe even an hour and a half with you on a coaching session to help you get some more focus and clarity and some action points to help you and your business move forwards. So we've had a question in from Rob, and he's put lots of great info here. What would you say is the priority on being a great leader? Well, I'd refer you back to that first slide. Being a great leader is about bringing focus and passion to your team. It's about bringing positive emotion, and the key to that is great communication. You know, some of the points we covered under great communication: clarity, understanding your audience, making sure it's frequent and proactive. And after that, it's understanding your team and understanding exactly where your team are now and getting that feedback from them. And that's why I think this engagement multiplier tool is such a great tool for business owners to use. It's just gone 1:45 now. Has anybody else got any questions? Let's just see. Okay, Joanne, yeah, we'll get that sorted for you. Thank you very much for that. We've got a couple of people now saying they want to join the leadership workshop and the one-to-one coaching sessions. You put a note in the Q&A box if you want to. Other than that, there will be a feedback form coming out to you all immediately after this workshop that you can complete, and then we'll get in touch with you on the back of that. Some simple check boxes on there. Feedback is the breakfast of champions, so please, please, please take some time. It'll only take you 10 minutes maximum, probably 5 minutes to fill the form out for us. Paul, I'm just going to unmute you for a second. Are you still with us, Paul?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know whether you had any closing comments.
No, I think that was excellent, Paul. Some really good tips there for us all to take away and give some serious thought to actioning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. So my closing remark would be, just remember, we are the leaders who need to lead right now in our business, but also in our wider community. So just make sure that you're leading from the front, and you've got that great communication with your team. Finally, if anybody would like to get in touch, our details are on there, the email and the website. If you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, then I'd love to connect with you all on LinkedIn. There, my LinkedIn profile is listed on that final slide. And if you want to connect with us on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or any of the other socials, you can use the tag @BusinessCoachNW for Northwest. Thank you very much for your time, everybody. Thank you for your attention. It's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed speaking to you, and I hope to speak to all of you moving forwards in the future. Enjoy the rest of the week. Have a brilliant week, and speak soon. Thank you.